January 24th, 2026. Monroe, Louisiana's emergency lines are swamped. 1,847 desperate calls in 6 hours, all reporting the same thing. Not snow, but ice, coating everything it touched, building fast, shattering power lines, and leaving entire neighborhoods silent and dark. The official story is a winter storm. But what if this was the moment America's entire grid reached its breaking point? This is how the freeze began. So why did the ice refuse to stop? Phones ring. The lines don't stop. 6 hours into the morning of January 24th, Monroe's emergency dispatchers are drowning. Each call blends into the next. Panic, confusion, voices cracking with fear. Not snow, not sleet, ice. Thick, heavy, relentless. It coats everything. Roads, porches, cars, entire neighborhoods sealed in a glass shell. Power lines sag under the weight, then snap with a sound like gunfire. Transformers blow, sending blue flashes across the sky. More calls. A mother trapped with 3 children, the house already freezing. A nurse reporting the hospital's backup generator is sputtering. A truck driver stranded on Interstate 20, windshield frozen, nowhere to go. One call after another, each one echoing the same urgent plea. Help now. The dispatcher's voice grows hoarse, repeating instructions that bring little comfort. Stay inside, block the drafts, don't touch downed wires, wait for rescue. But the reality is clear, no one is coming soon. Roads are impassable, coated in ice 2 inches thick. Fire trucks can't leave their stations. Ambulances slide off the road before reaching the first mile. Even police cruisers equipped for southern storms are useless against this. The city's grid, built for heat and hurricanes, is powerless against the cold. Outside, the world is silent, except for the groan of trees splitting under the weight. Whole branches crash through roofs, sending families scrambling into hallways for shelter. Streetlights blink out, 1 block at a time. The temperature drops. Inside the call center, the digital counter climbs, hundreds, then over 1,000. By noon, 1,847 emergency calls have poured in, each one a snapshot of disaster. The pattern is unmistakable. The storm isn't passing. The ice is building, hour after hour, and no one knows when or if it will stop. Some callers are already losing hope. A man in his 70s says he can't feel his hands. A teenager asks if it is safe to burn old magazines for heat. The dispatcher hesitates. There are no good answers. Every line is occupied. Every operator is stretched thin. The only certainty is that Monroe is not alone. Reports are coming in from towns up and down the Delta. Identical stories, identical fears. The scale is overwhelming. This is not a winter storm. This is something else, and it is just beginning. At 3:42 a.m., the atmosphere above the Deep South split into layers. National Weather Service researchers reading the first data from overnight radio sondes noticed a narrow band of air just above 2,000 feet measuring above freezing. Below it, the surface air held steady at 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain from higher up fell through this warm layer, melted into droplets, and then struck the frozen ground, power lines, and trees. Each drop froze instantly on contact. The process repeated, hour after hour, as the warm layer refused to budge. Forecast models, even the most advanced, failed to capture the full picture. The region's sparse radio sonde network left gaps in low-level temperature readings. Assimilation errors crept in. Simulations underestimated both the depth of the surface cold and the persistence of the warm nose aloft. Early predictions called for a brief period of freezing rain, maybe a few hours, a half-inch of ice at worst. What happened instead defied expectations. The warm layer lingered. Arctic air locked in by a 1,051 millibar high-pressure system held the freezing line in place for nearly 4 days. Radio sonde launches from Jackson, Mississippi confirmed the rare vertical profile. Cold at the surface, a tongue of warmth above, then another cold layer higher up. This sandwich of temperatures created the ideal recipe for catastrophic ice. Every 6 hours, another inch of ice formed. In Ashley County, Arkansas, sleet piled up to 7 inches. In northern Louisiana, the ice reached a full inch thick on exposed surfaces. Engineers calculated the load. Each inch added 500 pounds of weight to every 100 yards of power line. With no melting and no thaw, the burden grew until the grid's physical limits were exceeded. Tree limbs already heavy with ice crashed down, dragging lines and poles with them. The math was simple, the outcome inescapable. Researchers at the National Weather Service watched the numbers climb in real time. They saw the atmospheric inversion sustain itself, hour after hour, as the polar vortex fracture kept Arctic air bottled up at the surface. The models had missed the scale, but the physics were relentless. The ice just kept building, layer upon layer, until the infrastructure gave way. The backbone of the South's electrical grid was set in place during the economic boom of the 1960s and the 1970s. Across Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi, utility companies stretched miles of wooden poles and bare aluminum wires over fields and forests, following standards that assumed the future would look much like the past. At the time, engineers designed these systems to last 50 years. 50 years for the poles, the crossarms, the insulators, each component expected to endure a predictable rhythm of storms, heat, and the occasional brush with winter. No one imagined a world where the climate would deliver ice storms measured not in fractions of an inch, but in whole inches, or sleet that would bury entire counties. Decades passed. The grid aged. Annual maintenance budgets shrank as utilities deferred upgrades, patching the old network instead of rebuilding it. By 2026, much of the region's infrastructure had reached or exceeded its intended lifespan. Some poles had stood through 5 decades of hurricanes, termites, and southern sun, their cores softening, their steel hardware rusted thin. Transmission lines that once hummed with confidence now carried the burden of a changing climate and the weight of decisions made generations earlier. National reports had warned of this vulnerability. The American Society of Civil Engineers, in its latest assessment, gave U.S. infrastructure a grade of C-. The power grid scored even lower. Inspectors cataloged aging substations, brittle insulators, and wooden poles blackened by time. In rural parishes and counties, the story was the same. Repair crews replacing the same hardware their fathers had installed, using parts from warehouses stocked in the Reagan era. Dr. James Morrison, a power systems engineer, described the consequences in plain terms. When ice loading exceeds design specifications by 400%, the grid does not flex. It breaks. The systems that keep the lights on were built for a climate that no longer exists. The collapse was not a surprise to those who understood the numbers. Every inch of ice, every extra pound, was a reminder that the grid's design life had quietly expired. As the storm hammered the region, the physical limits of old infrastructure were revealed in real time. Structures that might have survived a half-inch of ice now faced loads 2 times, 3 times, even 4 times greater. The result was mechanical overload on a scale the original builders never anticipated. The grid's age was no longer a statistic. It was a fault line, exposed and widening under the weight of a new reality. Ice is not just a nuisance. It is a force measured in tons. Every inch that forms on a power line adds another 500 pounds of weight to a single span, the distance between 2 poles. In northern Louisiana, engineers recorded accumulations passing 1 inch by the end of the second day. That is 1,000 pounds of extra load pulling on hardware designed for a quarter of that stress. The grid's original blueprints, drawn up in the 1960s, called for tolerances that matched the climate of their era. Half an inch of ice, maybe a little more for safety. No one expected 4 times that burden. Dr. James Morrison, a power systems engineer, puts it plainly. When ice loading surpasses design by 400%, the system does not adapt. It fails. The steel hardware bends, then shears. Wooden poles, already weakened by decades of sun and rain, split down the center or snap at ground level. Crossarms twist under the strain. Even the strongest insulators, built to withstand hurricanes, cannot resist the slow, relentless pressure of ice. The grid is a chain, and every link is tested at once. Stress tests run by utilities over the past decade had warned of this possibility. In controlled environments, engineers simulated ice storms by layering weights onto test spans. At 500 pounds per 100 yards, warning lights flashed, but the system held. At 1,000 pounds, the first cracks appeared. At 1,500 pounds, the structure failed catastrophically. Wood splintered, metal buckled, lines fell. These numbers were never meant to be reached outside a lab. Now, across hundreds of miles, they were being exceeded in real time. The ice did not care about design standards or maintenance schedules. It accumulated hour after hour until the laws of physics took over. The result was not a gradual decline, but a sudden, total failure. Poles and wires that had weathered half a century of storms collapsed in minutes. Transmission lines sagged, then snapped, unleashing a cascade of outages that no utility could stop. The mechanical threshold had been crossed. There was no way back until the ice melted, or until the grid was rebuilt from the ground up. Destruction swept through the grid with a precision that left nothing to chance. Utility logs from the first 48 hours read like a tally from a war zone. 1,420 poles splintered, 5,050 spans of wire torn down, 340 transformers cracked open or burned out. These are not scattered breaks. This is the backbone of the system, snapped in thousands of places at once. Each pole lost means hours of labor, specialized equipment, and a supply chain already frozen by the storm. Every downed span stretches across fields and forests now buried under ice, unreachable by truck or foot. Crews report that many of the poles, some standing since the Johnson administration, gave way with barely a sound, just a sudden sickening lean and then collapse. Transformers, overloaded and encased in ice, exploded one after another, sending plumes of smoke into the frozen air. The numbers are more than statistics. They represent a nightmare. Replacing a single pole under normal conditions takes a team most of a day. Here, with roads impassable and ice still falling, the timeline expands to weeks. A utility CEO, voice tight with exhaustion, put it bluntly. "We are not repairing damage. We are rebuilding a grid from scratch. You cannot just patch this. Every section is a total loss." The scale of the destruction means restoration is not a matter of flipping a switch. It is an operation that will test every resource, every worker, and every promise of modern infrastructure. For many, the lights will not come back on for a long, long time. 1 million homes and businesses lose power as the temperature outside plunges to 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, the cold seeps through walls and windows. By the end of the first day, the warmth is gone. Thermometers in living rooms and bedrooms read 32 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing. By the second night, the air indoors is as bitter as it is outside. Wind chills dip to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the open, but inside the shelter of houses, blankets and coats are no match for the relentless cold. Families huddle together in dark rooms, breath hanging in the air. Some burn chairs and old books for heat. Others run car engines in garages, desperate for warmth, unaware of the silent threat of carbon monoxide. Firefighters are stranded, unable to reach homes where smoke now curls from makeshift chimneys. Calls for help go unanswered. Roads are so slick that ambulances sit idle, their engines running just to keep crews from freezing. The death toll rises, 38 confirmed so far, a number that grows with every hour the grid stays dark. A FEMA spokesperson, voice tight with exhaustion, describes the situation as a national emergency. "We are deploying all available resources, but conditions are preventing access to the worst-hit areas. Our teams are working around the clock, but we cannot reach everyone." In neighborhoods across the Delta, the stories are the same. Elderly residents found unresponsive in beds, children wrapped in winter coats, teeth chattering, asking when the lights will come back. The grid's failure is not just an engineering problem. It is a human disaster, measured in lives lost to cold, isolation, and the slow, silent spread of despair. A strange haze settles over the parishes and counties of the Delta. The air, once bitingly clear, now carries the smell of wood smoke and diesel. With 3.5 million people trapped in the blackout zone, survival means burning anything that will catch. A kitchen chair? A pile of magazines? Gasoline in a borrowed generator. The result is a toxic sky. Air quality monitors register particulate levels 6 times higher than average. Carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide, invisible but deadly, seep through neighborhoods where windows are sealed tight against the cold. Steam emissions from power plants surge by 200% as operators push emergency generators to their limits, but the electricity never reaches the homes that need it. Dr. Sarah Okafor, a climate systems analyst at MIT, studies the satellite images and sensor data pouring in from across the region. She points to a pattern she has seen before, one that is growing more frequent. The stalled polar vortex, the locked-in Arctic air, the perfect warm layer for freezing rain, these are not random acts of nature, but symptoms of a changing atmosphere out of balance. She says, "We are seeing the fingerprints of a changing atmosphere. Events like this are now possible in places that never planned for them." The warnings from emergency management teams grow sharper. This is not a localized disaster. The phrase "first domino" passes quietly through official channels. If the polar vortex fractures again before repairs are made, the next wave of ice could push failures east into the densely populated corridors of the eastern seaboard. The crisis is not receding. It is expanding, with every hour the ice holds and every breath drawn from the poisoned air. The line between regional emergency and national catastrophe has never felt thinner. America's electrical grid is now older than the climate it was built for. As extreme weather accelerates and infrastructure ages past its limits, systemic collapse is no longer a distant threat. It is a present reality for millions. The grid's fragility shapes every decision, from city planning to emergency response. In a warming world, resilience isn't optional. It is the difference between lights on and everything stopping. Share your thoughts below.